Hi, welcome to my YouTube channel. In the last session, we have seen the introduction of the Catia designing tool and how to use line command. Now, we will go through different types of polygons. In this first, that is rectangle. To draw a rectangle, you need to click on one corner of the rectangle and then you will define the opposite corner. As soon as you click, these horizontal and vertical points are the coordinates. As soon as you click on the one point of the rectangle, it will show width and height. If you want directly, you can type it here. If I want width as 100 mm, then height as 50 mm, and then press enter. You will get a rectangle of width 100 mm and height 50 mm. The easy way to draw a rectangle is draw a rectangle approximately from one point to another point. Go to constraint, click the vertical line and then the horizontal line. If you want to change the horizontal length, double click on it and change the dimension. If you want to change the height, double click on the height and then you can change the dimension. If I want to draw a rectangle, if I double click on it and change it to 120, and then here I'll click the constraint and then I'll double click on it and change it to 60. As I have defined the horizontal length previously, if I define it, it will turn into pink. The pink color shows us that this rectangle is over constraint because we have defined it 120 here, again we are defining it 120 here. So what you will do is, instead of these two, you have to define only one. To remove this pink color or to remove this over constraint, you will select one dimension and then delete it. See, if I draw a rectangle again, I will define this dimension, again I will define this dimension. So this will be over constraint. For this you have to click on one dimension and then delete it. For every rectangle, to give its dimension, I need to go to constraint and then click it. Then again I will need to go to the constraint and then define its dimension. To define n number of items or to define n number of rectangles or any line, what you will do it, double click on the constraint, double click on the constraint icon. By double click on the constraint icon, you can define n number of times. No need to go to constraint again. If I draw a line, we have different types of line. If I double click on the constraint, I can define this line and also give dimension to this line. No need to go again to the constraint. This double click applies to all the icons. For example, if I draw a rectangle, as soon as I draw a rectangle, the command will get exit itself. If I double click on an icon, you can draw n number of rectangles. To pan or move the surface, just hold the wheel on the mouse firmly and then you can move it. Here also there is an icon called pan. By clicking it and just holding the right click of the mouse, you can move it. To zoom in, we have option here. By clicking on it, you can zoom in, and this is zoom out. There are other ways to zoom in and zoom out. Hold the control key in your keyboard, then by using the wheel of the mouse, hold the control key and then hold the wheel of the mouse, and then by moving the mouse forward and backward, you can zoom in and zoom out. If you click the wheel of the mouse first, hold the wheel of the mouse first and then press Ctrl. The surface will rotate. To get back to the normal view, you will click it here, the normal view. You will get the normal view again. To fit it, to fit the screen, to get the fitted screen, you will click on fit all in here. This icon fits the drawing in the one surface or one screen. So zoom in and then zoom out. So next is oriented rectangle. In oriented rectangle, you will draw a line or define a line first. From that you will draw a rectangle. I repeat, you will draw a line first and then from that you will draw a rectangle. To change the dimensions of this, you will again go to constraint, double click on the constraint, then define the horizontal and then the vertical. If you change the vertical line to 100, automatically the opposite side also gets changed. If you change this, automatically the opposite side also gets changed. This is oriented rectangle. Next is parallelogram. Again, you need to define a line and from that you will draw a parallelogram. Again, if you want to change the dimension, then again go to constraint, double click on the constraint, then change the dimensions by double clicking on the number 60 and then press enter. If I want to change it to 150, type 150 and then press enter. Next is elongated hole. To draw elongated hole, you need to define 2 points first point and then the second point and then the radius. You need to click 3 points, first point, second point and then the third point. As this geometrical constraint and dimensioning constraint are on, it will automatically show the radius. If you need to change the radius, double click on that radius icon and change it to whatever dimensions you want. See, already the radius is shown here. If you again go to constraint and define the radius, it will be over constraint. So when you get over constraint, you need to delete one of those. Just click on it and delete it from your keyboard. To specify the dimension of this line, you need to again go to constraint and give its dimension either way, either upward or downwards. Then if you want to change it, double click on it and then change its length. I repeat, to draw a elongated hole, you need to define 3 points, first point, second point and then the radius. Radius will be automatically shown. To change the dimension of this line, you will go to constraint and show its dimensions. Next is cylindrical elongated hole. Cylindrical elongated hole, you need to define an arc here. First the center point of the arc, the start point of the arc and then the end point of the arc and then the radius. Here in the elongated hole, you are defining 3 points and here you will be defining 4 points. First the center point, second point the start point, third point the end point of the arc and then the dimension or the radius. Automatically the radius will be shown here. Double click on the radius and then change its dimension. If you want to change the radius of this, then go to constraint and then change the radius. I will take it as 80. You can change any of these, only one you can change. See, if I again change the dimension, it will be over constraint. So for this you need to delete any one of this. I will delete this. So again pan it. Next is keyhole profile. In keyhole profile, you will define the first point, then the second point, then the below radius or lower radius and then the upper radius. As the dimension constraint and geometrical constraints are on, the dimension of the radius will be shown. You can change the radius here, first radius, and you can change the second radius here, second radius. And for this length, you will again go to constraint, click on that constraint line, and then you will define the dimension, and then double click on it and change the dimension. Keyhole profile, first point, second point, change the dimension. You can define the radius of the lower part and then the upper part. If you want to reverse the keyhole profile, you will first select the first point here, second point here, here this is the lower radius and this is the upper radius. Next is hexagon. Hexagon, you just click the center point of the hexagon and define the hexagon. To change the dimension, you will again go to constraint and just change the dimension of a single side. As soon as you double click on it and change the side to 40, all sides will be changed. The dimension of each side will be 40 mm. Next is centered rectangle. Centered rectangle is a rectangle drawn from its center point. It is equally distributed on both sides. The distance between center point and this line will be same as the distance between this point and the line. Whenever we use a rectangle in Catia, try to draw a centered rectangle. Next is centered parallelogram. For this, you need to draw two lines. Exit the line command. Now go to centered parallelogram. For this, you need to select the first line and the second line. The intersection of these two lines will be the center of the parallelogram. I repeat, draw the first line, draw the second line, exit the command, go to centered parallelogram, select the first line, select the second line. Automatically the intersection point will be the center of the parallelogram.